All right. Hello, hello, friends. You are live with us at Trans Northland. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all of you who are tuning in with us live today. I hope you are having a lovely Wednesday so far, at least here in Duluth. It's a beautiful sunny day, nice cool temperatures. I got to be by the lake earlier, so it's great. And now I'm so excited to be joined here by my new friend, Candi, who I'll invite you to turn your camera on when you're ready here. And then, okay, I'm going to unmute you. So, yes, we're so excited to be joined by Candi, who I will let introduce herself in a moment. But for those of you who haven't joined us yet here live with Trans Northland, this is a new fun thing we're trying out as a way to just have great conversations with community members who are out in the world doing really cool things. And so today I'm very excited and grateful to be joined here by Candi. And I'd love it if you'd just give a little introduction about who you are.
Okay, well, my name is Candi Stratton. That's my stage name. I have been performing since about 1982. I transitioned I started my transition at about 18, 19 years old, and then completed my transition at 26. I have been in the LGBTQ community for many, many years, not just in the States, but over in Australia, in Thailand, and other parts of the world. At 56 years old, I became the very first crowned Miss Trans USA. And never in my wildest dream thought I would win the pageant. I just did it because it was going to be for Mr. and Miss Trans USA. And I thought, well, nobody's ever doing anything for the trans men. Finally, there's something for the trans men. I wanted to get my name out there and give it some validity and get, some of the trans men interested in doing it. And and then I won. But I'm going to be honest with you. It was probably at that time in 2019, the best title I had ever won. Because with the title of Miss Trans USA, it opened up a lot of doors for me to be able to go and speak at different events, at different prides across the country, perform at different areas. I spoke at several hospitals, and it was the best title that I was ever able to hold. Today, that's kind of scary. So.
Yes, yes. Wow. Well, I feel so deeply grateful. I feel like I'm being, fanboying over here for your celebrity status.
Oh.
But I, just want to say thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us for this conversation. And I know I had reached out, a couple weeks ago to your workplace because I had realized that October is LGBTQ plus History Month, which I've known, but I think just the chaos of the current moment we're living through, I sort of didn't realize it at first. And then I was like, oh, wait, I follow this great organization on Instagram. And so I'm just so glad that we can connect to have this conversation and hear a little bit more about the work that organization is doing, that you're working with, and about your role there, and just why we should care about LGBT plus history and why that is so important, again, in this current moment that we're all surviving through and living through and trying to thrive through in moments as well. And so, but before we dive in, so one of the things we're trying out is starting off our conversations with like a gender euphoria or gender joy story. And I think I had asked that of you ahead of time. I might be putting it on the spot now. But I'm wondering if there's anything, that's happened recently for you that you'd be willing to share with me and our listeners and viewers that has just brought you some amazing gender joy.
You know, as far as gender joy, I mean, every day waking up is a gender joy to be in the gender that I identify in. You know, I mean, because gender dysphoria is real, and I mean, I can't tell you, but I was just telling you, probably a proud moment, you know, was Sunday when I was just doing this performance down in Springfield, and to finally be an elder, I felt like, you know, there was this young man that came in and talked to me backstage. We were talking about this earlier, and he said to me, "Oh, people out there were telling me that you transitioned, you know, early, and you know, I just was wondering, with everything that's going on, how are you feeling?" And you know, it really made me think, you know, because I'm not going to lie to you, you know, I think a lot. I think a lot of us think lately, you know, what's going on, you know, with these people that are trying to ruin our gender joy, you know, or just our life experience in general. And but you know, I explained that, you know, you've got to have your support system. At that time, he told me that he was trans and that his parents, you know, were very supportive, and also his friends around. And I said, well, you know what, we have to have those that support us, especially our chosen family, and be there for each other. And you know, that gave me joy, that I was able to tell somebody else that, you know, I'm not the only one out there feeling this, but here's somebody young that's feeling this, and I want that person to still have that life that I'm having at 62 years old. You know, because I'm going to tell you, at 18, you know, 19, in the early 80s, you know, when I started transitioning, things changed, you know, and I didn't think I'd be here today. And to see that I'm still here, you know, and all the people and all the friends that I lost through AIDS, all you know, my black and brown sisters that have been, you know, murdered for just being trans, you know, for just existing, you know, I mean, i I never thought I'd see 62, you know. And so Sunday, that was, I would probably tell you, that was gender, you know, happiness for me, or just realization that, you know, I'm glad that I am still here to live my life, live my truth, and share support for somebody else. So I think that's
Yes.
it. I think that's that day. So
Yeah, wow, that's a great one, and thank you for sharing that. I've heard that from a lot of elders, you know, folks who, you know, sort of have that, a similar, at least, experience of going through the AIDS epidemic, and you know, losing so many folks, and yet I'm sure, you know, gaining so many connections and friends too in
oh,
that time, right? Because how else does
absolutely.
the community continue on, right? You know, in
Absolutely.
something so
And
scary
you
as
know, we wouldn't have gotten through it if all of us weren't all together. You know, what's making me sick is the people that are trying to divide us and cut out the trans community out of the LGBTQ, you know, umbrella. And, you know, without the trans community, a lot of us wouldn't have, you know, the rights that we have. You know, the Stonewall riot didn't happen without, you know, uh, uh, Marsha and Sylvia. So you know, I mean, it's and you know, a lot of these younger people that are saying, oh, we should cut them off. You know, they changed the. It used to be the GLBTQ. Well, no, the Q wasn't on there yet. Uh, uh, because you know, the reason they put the L in front was because the lesbians really stepped up so much, you know, in helping all the guys that were dying from AIDS, and nobody would take care of them. But you know, they forget to talk about that the drag and the trans community was there also. I mean, I can't tell you how many per night, you know, benefit shows and fundraisers we were doing to raise money for those that were sick, for their hospital bills, for you know, AIDS research, you know, and showing up for them also in the hospital. So, we were a team, all of us back then. And to want to discard us now, it is so disheartening. It breaks my heart.
Most definitely. I know I've seen, some of those messages that are, sadly I'm seeing more of them now. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting, that you bring up Stonewall, because it makes me think of that, the famous speech that Sylvia uh, gives, where she's basically yelling at all of these white gay men who have sort of tried to take over this movement that was, really ignited. And I think throughout history, we've seen this to be true, right? It is ignited by Black and brown, trans women of color, queer trans people. And so, I'm going to pop up our little banner, for our first question, because I think it's like the perfect lead in, right? I mean, thinking about this current moment, thinking about History Month, and so I'm curious, in your lifetime, I can't imagine all of the experiences that you've had, within the community, feeling a part of it, maybe feeling, as an outsider at times within our own community. And I'm just curious, as the work that you do this month, what does it bring up for you? What does this mean for you?
It brings up a lot. It brings up a lot of good feelings. It brings up a lot of sad feelings. It brings up a lot of nostalgia. I have to tell you that the group that I'm a part of, the Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project, started by Michael, it's been such an eye-opener for me to be a part of. I'm on the advisory board. But that board that has created this, I think it's been like 30 years now since they've been going. But thanks to the internet, the past few years, they've really been able, they have brought so much history to not just Wisconsin, but everywhere. And I went on, Milwaukee had, not this past weekend, the weekend before, they had what they called an open door tour, where they opened up a lot of their historical buildings. You could go inside, whether they have been refurbished or whatever. You could go see these historical buildings or this historical walks and learn about the history. And a friend of mine went, and I went to several buildings. Then later that day, we went on to, or I think it was the next day, we went to the tour that Michael and Diane were doing from the Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project. And oh my gosh, talk about the knowledge that I learned that these amazing board members have collected and were able to pass on to us. I mean, things that I didn't know. Talking about two of the very first, trans men in Milwaukee, and also the importance of what they do. They got one of the first LGBTQ history dedication markers put up in Milwaukee to, the Black Knight Club, and one of the original trans girls in Milwaukee, and her fight almost, and it was before Stonewall. But just the story and the history, I mean, it was like, wow, when you think that you know everything, you don't know anything. A minuscule, because the stuff that they were telling us. And even my friend who was up from visiting from Chicago, he's a coworker with me, and he goes, I'm a history buff, and he goes, I loved this. I go, even though it was Milwaukee, and he goes, yeah, I mean, it's a history for the whole LGBTQ community, and to hear that, so this month means, because we have so many people arguing and fighting with us that, rainbow this and flag this, and why do you need a Pride Month? And why do you, what about veterans? Yet there's so many things for veterans. So if you're really a veteran, pro-veteran, you wouldn't be asking something like that, because all the different things that are out there for Veterans Day, and in October, is also a veterans time. And so it's so important that we as a community learn our history from everywhere. And I'm so glad that they have this month, and I'm so glad that there's organizations like the Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project that are out there informing all of us. So, yeah, that's what that means to me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Great answer. I mean, no wrong answers here for sure. But I love that. I mean, just the fact that, some of these things, right? Well, there's probably tons, right, that I don't even know about that have
Right.
happened pre Stonewall Riot, right? That's the big one that so many of us hear about and learn about. And I think take inspiration from and learn from how those folks were organizing then after that, right? Um, but I just, yeah, it kind of gives me chills to know, like, it's like right next door to Minnesota, right? In Milwaukee,
Oh,
right?
I
These
used,
folks
you
have
know,
been
I used,
around.
I used to live in Minneapolis. I told you earlier, years ago. Minneapolis has a rich culture of the LGBTQ, for years that I also didn't know. And I didn't learn that from a specific group. I just learned about it. I worked at the 90s for a while in the shows up there. And I learned about some of the history from the people that have worked at the 90s for many, many years. And just it's such a rich culture in every state, you know, in every country.
Most certainly. Could not agree more. And we're using this new software where it's like, we can see your comments now. So we see some folks are tuning in and sharing some love with you,
Uh,
Candi.
Thank you.
So just want to thank these folks who are tuning in. Hey, Kia. Oh, happy birthday. Um, yeah, so it's curious to me too, right? Because I want to learn more about the organization, right? And like, so you mentioned you're on the advisory board, was it?
Yes.
And then so like, yeah, what types of things does this organization do? Are there ways community members, in Wisconsin and nearby can get involved, with events that are being hosted?
Oh,
What can you tell us?
absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, go to their website or also on Instagram or Facebook. And I think you got it right there. And sign up. They are a nonprofit, so donations are great to help keep them up and running. But they make sure that they get out there and that history is remembered. Like I said, they put the first dedication, marker in the city of Milwaukee, and working on more. And I think they just did something with This Is It. Unfortunately, This Is It, which was the longest running gay bar that was still open, just recently closed in Milwaukee. But I think they're working on making, or if they haven't, I think they've already got it to be, there's going to be a historical marker for it also. And so that it will be remembered. They just got the rainbow sidewalks approved and done this past Sunday. Unfortunately, I wasn't there because I was out of town performing, but they got those sidewalks painted. The city approved it, and I mean they're just full force in making sure that we're supported, that everything is remembered, that that we are seen, and most important that we are important and we belong here. And I couldn't be prouder to be part of this group. So make sure you check it out and join us and be a part. If you've got information, you want to share with us, that we may not know, history information, please share it with us, because, we can never learn enough, and have enough history. So
That's absolutely right. And we will keep scrolling, having this little banner scrolling with their website down
great.
below throughout our conversation, because we want you to connect. All of you viewers, if you're watching after the fact, go and check them out. I know I've followed the group on Instagram, I think. And so, they're on the socials, follow what they're doing. Because it's like, as you said, like back in the day when our community was a team, right? Like now
Right.
is the time to, I mean, I think there's still pockets of those teams, right? Like those have continued, and we need to like
Absolutely.
keep building the team stronger, as we
Each
continue to face more and more hardship, challenges. I mean, threats of who knows? I mean, I don't want to speak too many things out there, but every time I open a social media thing, there's some new scary thing, right? And knowing that we have this team, we have this community, right, is like what gets me through these scary moments when I'm like, oh no, what
especially
are we
like
doing?
if you're in a small town somewhere, I mean, sometimes we only have the internet, and sometimes the things that are being put out on the internet are always not the best, and with false narrative to scare you, to frighten you, to out you, but when you have something like this that's there for support you, it's great. What you're doing is great. Somebody can look, we talked about this earlier, somebody, in a small town somewhere, doesn't feel like they have anybody else like them in their city, and they can come to this and hear what you have to say, and other people from around the country, if not around the world, some people you may interview. So it's great to have all of this out there. Part of my role with them is advising on my life experience, and that's what most the people on the advisory team at board is our lived experiences. I started performing in Chicago and Milwaukee in 1982, until 1989. And in doing so, actually up until 1990. And, but there are stories. I mean, I remember Jeffrey Dahmer coming to the bar that I worked at, 219, and watching. Although that Jeffrey Dahmer documentary that they had on whatever it was, Pose, not Pose, but net, what was Pose on? It was on FX.
This was on FX, yeah.
Yes, and they did that story thing. I mean, they got so much wrong in it. And when we were doing that history, the open door history walk the weekend before, we all talked about it, how they got it wrong, and so many things that they got it wrong. How they painted 219 as the place where he really was picking it up, and it was this major, black bar, and one of the former Erica Stevens, wrote, it was not like that at all back then. And she was I think she was our first African American performer with us, and she said even though they let her in, other people in the Black community had a hard time getting in at most all the bars. But, Jeffrey Dahmer picked up most his sadly his, victims at a bar called C'est La Vie, which was down a ways, So that's where we come in as advisors. We can correct what the mistakes or the false information that's put out there, or just share the information that we had that people don't realize.
Yep. Oh man. And oh man, it just makes me think about this moment, right? Where people are erasing and removing those historical markers, right? We're walking back, or, folks are trying to walk back the history of this community. And literally we're watching that happen, the erasure of our community. And so, I think how much more vital like the work is that y'all are doing to make sure that those histories do stay complete and as close to like, the factual story of what happened, right? Because I think for me, as someone who does community organizing work, I'm constantly trying to be learning from our ancestors, from the folks like Marcia and Sylvia, and thinking about what the heck, how did they do this with no resources, with, hardly any support, and like, how did they build this close community that did support each other, that did take queer youth off the street and give them places to live and help folks find housing and all of the support that folks in our community need. And so knowing those true, real histories, I think for me is so vital. Probably as I get older too, I similarly feel like the older I get, the less I realize I know. And I just have so much more, I think, to learn from folks like you and others in our community who have been around and have seen these different sort of shifts in the political landscape and just in the levels of violence I think our community has always faced, but also seeing those rates rising sadly right now in this moment.
I recently saw something shared on Instagram by an entertainer that I had known for years, and Aurora Sexton, and it was actually from a year ago, an interview that she had done, and she was talking about during her transition, years ago, and listening to her, I'm like, first of all, I thought she was so eloquent and she spoke so well, but her message and that she came out, it was like she was just talking off my head. Like what she was saying was just coming, years ago, we were flourishing. I didn't think of anything other than I'm happy, I'm living my truth, I'm just living every day. I'm just this, trans woman who is happy to be in society, happy to live, no problems, nobody's attacking me, to all of a sudden. And she said, then things came out and it made it even better. And I liked how she worded this or said this. She said, you had things like Pose, and then you had these actresses come out like Laverne Cox. You had the very first, trans woman in a network TV, which was Candace Kane in Dirty Sexy Money. Then you had Alexandra Billings, who I started my performing with back in 1983. We started together at La Cage in Chicago, and then she joined us up in Milwaukee. She, her name back then was Shantae, and now, she has changed to Alexandra Billings. And I couldn't be prouder to see all the things that she's done, and from where we all started to where she is today. I had the opportunity. We saw each other a few years ago when she was still performing in Chicago at, I think it was called the Gentry, because she used to be like a jazz singer, and go to these piano bars and sing around the country, and not just gay. I mean, straight, she was often booked in New York at Don't Tell Mama. And I mean, this is how amazing of a singer she is, an actress. But then she got on, Transparent. She was the therapist on the TV show Transparent, and then went on to be in so many TV shows, and then got on the counters. But the coolest thing was she was the first trans woman to have a leading role in a musical on Broadway, and she was Madame Marbles in Wicked. And a good friend of mine saw that she was in it, and he asked me if I wanted to go. I flew out to New York, and we went and saw it. He got us tickets, and I'll never forget that. And I will love him forever for it. And she asked us backstage afterwards, and I mean, to see that, here we were, two kids starting out together and transitioning, in life, and to see where we both had, I mean, I haven't achieved the things that she has, but, I was so proud. So there's history right there, some Milwaukee and Wisconsin and Illinois history right there. And, but to just sit there, and we have front row seats, thanks to my friend, and to sit there and look up and just, I'll never forget when we performed at La Cage and at 219, Joan Rivers had just put out her one woman show on an album. And Shantae went out there and would do this. And I can tell you that watching her, I was like, I used to say, she was such a good actress that you couldn't even tell she was lip syncing. I mean, and I used to joke with her all the time. If you just wear a blonde wig, you'd actually look like Joan Rivers, but she kept her hair brown. But she was phenomenal. And then I knew it. And I called it back then. I said, she is one of the most amazing actresses ever. So, there's history right there, and those that we started with, those that, are coming up. But then, what's her name? Aurora went on to say, and then say what you will. And she said this so eloquently. She said, like her or not, that interview that Caitlyn Jenner did with, Diane Sawyer was groundbreaking. For Aurora, her parents finally called her and told her, I finally get it, you know, and other parents, could understand a little bit better, and like she said, her political views and all that today, I'm not going to get into it because, it's somebody for me also, I don't agree with whatever, with her, whatever. But, and then Donald Trump came along and he made it okay for everybody to hate each other and dislike each other. But she said that, but I also don't blame it all on him. I think that, it starts from those. I know one of them is Heritage Foundation. I can't remember the name of the other horrible Christian national group that's out there that have been pushing this stuff, for years, wanting to turn back not just trans rights, but all of LGBTQ rights. But, who do you go after first? Just like in Nazi Germany, you go after the trans community. And then you go after everybody else because these are the most marginalized, and these are the people that we can get people scared up and riled up about and frightened about. I mean, I look at you and look at me on here, and I honestly don't see that you and I are very radicalized, extremist group, that most terrorist, domestic terrorist group, So, I know I stutter a lot, but I don't think that I need to be institutionalized. I don't think that I'm sick in the head or whatever. So it's mind-boggling. But her message on there was something that I shared it. It was something that, as I just shared it right now, it was so beautifully said. And it needs to be shared more, that wake up. I do hope, I do share, I don't know about you. I'm one of those people that probably overshare too much political things on my pages, but I feel in my heart, in my head, the things that I'm sharing are about our history, about trans history, about, that we are not mental illness cases, that we are, I've said it to you before, that I'm a human being with a heart and a soul. I'm an American citizen who pays my taxes, has a job, works a job, pays my taxes, doesn't get in trouble with the law. I followed the law and I love my country, so why all of a sudden do I not matter as an American citizen? I'm an American citizen. I'm just not your American citizen, because your America is not everybody's America.
That's right.
It's just yours. Those people that don't agree with us or have jumped on this bandwagon of these, whatever, Christian national groups that are against us. Am I like way offline here?
No, I don't think so. I think you've hit a couple things that I want to touch on, I think. And I'm also just trying to keep an eye on our chat too, because folks are definitely chiming in here and there.
Oh God.
And so we,
I can't do anything. So
no, well,
they're like, turn her off.
No, they wouldn't be here, Candi. They're here for you.
Oh no, they're here for you.
Stop it. Oh my gosh, you're gonna make me blush. Oh my gosh.
Okay, go ahead and blush.
Okay, so a couple of things that this is bringing up, I think you mentioned, it's interesting because it was about like 10 years ago or so, because I remember it was around the time that I personally had sort of been coming into my own trans identity, had sort of figured this out, like this is a part of who I am, right? It's not all of who I am. I'm trans and so many other things, right? But at that same time, it was around the time when like Caitlyn Jenner had done that interview, Orange is the New Black was on, and Laverne Cox, like I remember seeing her and being like, oh my gosh, there's a trans person on this show that is amazing. And, and there were so many moments of, I think, what our community would call success, right? Like the visibility that has grown. And along with the visibility, right? Education, so many more folks, I think, outside of our community, even thinking about the broader LGBT plus community, folks who are not trans, right, but are a part of that community, you know, I think lots of folks, like, there were so many conversations that were started, knowledge and I think experiences shared by so many folks, like you're saying, Alexandra, and so many people sharing more trans stories. And that is, like, I think the best thing ever for our community, right? Like, we have to be able to have our stories out there for folks to be able to learn, to be able to, like, see, oh, wait, these are, as you said, these are real human beings who are working, they're loving their families or their chosen families, you know, they're just, we're trying to wake up every day and do life like any other American person, any other person in this country, I should say. And so, like, the huge, I think, movement that grew around 10-ish, you know, probably even longer than that, 15-ish years ago, maybe, the visibility that has increased. And yet, like, it is so easy to think about our history and think about all of the negative things, the scary things, right? The riots and all of that. But I think what you named and what you were sharing too is, like, there's always been vibrancy. There's always been joy. There's always been connection. And, you know, it's like, those aren't stories that we necessarily would read about in a history book, right? But, like, I think it's so interesting in these kinds of conversations, things that I would never have known, right? Unless you shared about your history, right? With Alexandra and these other amazing trans folks who, you know, I would say along with yourself have done so much in terms of building community and connection. And I think
I have to tell you, I think that our Black sisters and brothers build a lot more. And there was a recent debate on Instagram, and I mean, talk about, you know, a wake-up call for myself, but it bit a little, you know, bit me in the butt a little bit, but also, I mean, they're not wrong that they feel that the white trans sisters or brothers are not as vocal or as you know, fighting as hard as some of our Black sisters and brothers, you know, in the trans group are. And I am thankful for them. And I'm going to be the first to say, you're right when it comes to somebody like me. I don't think I'm a good speaker. I don't, you know, I'm not one of those people. I have terrible ADD. Well, I've had ADHD all my life, but didn't realize what it was till later in life. But, you know, I think I speak better than I write, but I'm not the most eloquent speaker. And some of these girls, they're phenomenal. I mean, Honey Brown and some of them out there. And for that, I want to apologize to them that if they felt that someone like me or anybody has not, you know, stood up as much as they have. I came from a time where I mean, I hate to call it my privileged, you know, whiteness or whatever they call it, you know. I came from a time where well, we all did, but, you know, some of these younger kids have been able to come out, you know, easier in life. When I transitioned back then, you know, you had to, and where I'm going with this, when I transitioned, I don't know how it is today, but, you know, when you're going to have your surgery, you had to go to get a psychological evaluation by a psychiatrist and a psychologist before anybody would operate on you. And part of the whole process is you had to go out in society and get a job in the gender you identified with for 2 years, you know, before they would even operate on you, because they want to make sure you would be okay in the community, you know, out in the world. And I'll never forget that I went to work at a department store. And even back then, you didn't even see gay guys in the cosmetic department, except maybe in fragrance, you know, escorting somebody, you know, but you never saw a gay guy or trans girl or trans guy, for that fact, working in cosmetics. You know, they just wouldn't hire us. And it was so hard to get a job. And for this being, that's why a lot of, trans people go into the sex industry back then. I don't think that, and listen, I have lots of sisters and brothers that have been in the sex industry, and I support them and I love them, because we all got to be able to live, and they've, we all have to be able to make a living. I think things have changed since I transitioned a lot, and I'll explain why. A certain airline I started my airline career with, it's not the airline I'm at now, but the airline that I started my career with, I remember going for the interview, and I was so naive. I was so naive. I just had my surgery 3 months before, and when I tell you that my ADD always takes over, I go into this interview. You had to stand up in front of the group and introduce yourself. I did. And I said my name, and you told a little bit about yourself. And then they decided they want you to go on to a one-on-one interview. And luckily I went on to the one-on-one. I'm still friends with this guy to this day. And in my interview, sitting down with him, I said, I have to tell you, I'm transsexual. And he's like, wow, that was really brave. And he said, he goes, I really like you, and I'm going to put you through, but you have to pass the training and the physical. I go, oh, what's a physical consist of? I just had my sex change 3 months ago, or 3 weeks ago or something. It was like, it was super fast. And he's like, oh, this is how naive. I just blurt all this stuff out to him. And you could have seen the look on his face each time. I was like, oh. He goes, well, I don't know. He goes, let me call the medical department. And because back then, to get the physical for an airline, for a flight attendant or even a pilot, you had to get a full physical, hospital gown. Girls got breast exams, ovary exams. I'm lucky they didn't do a pap smear. And guys even got a prostate exam. You had eye vision, hearing vision. Now, today, these kids just have to pee in a cup, and as long as it doesn't come up positive for drugs, there's your physical. You passed, you got the job. So, right?
Times be changing.
It has changed. So he called over to the medical center, and the nurse answered, and he explained that they had this because transgender wasn't a word back then. Said it had this transsexual, candidate, wanted to know it. And she goes, oh, well, the doctor's busy, but I'll have him call you back, as soon as he's free. Within 30 seconds, probably not even, the phone rang. And he's like, oh, I'll put this on speakerphone. This is probably the doctor. And I can't remember the doctor's name, but I like to make it up and say that, hi, Jeff, this is Dr. Doogie, calling from the medical center. And what's up? And he said, well, we had this candidate. She was honest and told us she was transsexual. He cuts him off and goes, Jeff, do you want to hire this person? We steer clear of those people here, and we don't hire them. And Jeff goes, oh, righty then. No, he asked him, he goes, do you want to hire this person? And he goes, well, she's attractive and has a good person. And that's when he comes off again. We don't hire those people here. We steer clear of them. This is 1989, remember, so, and so I learned back then, if you got a job, you shut up. And you don't say anything. And I stayed in stealth for years until 2002. I got married and moved to Australia with my husband. But I lived a double life, because there was my flight attendant life, which was, I say, was my real identity. And then there was my showgirl identity that I still continued to share with the LGBTQ community. And I shared with them that, I was living proof that if you want something, you can't let your fears hold you back. Because don't think that I wasn't afraid to go to these jobs and interview and figure out somebody would think, oh, and I hate to put it in these terms, but that's a man. Because I did go to one. I did go to an airline interview. And it was the first one I went to, and the recruiter said to another girl, she goes, that's a man. And of course they didn't put me through. And so I learned, but over the years of flying, I watched more and more, trans getting hired. and you could get hired back then, but a lot of times trans people had to transition after they got hired, because if they knew beforehand, they probably wouldn't have hired you. And you had to be careful afterwards, because if you didn't have a supervisor that supported you, then they would get rid of you, fire you, find a way to fire you. So I mean, I learned, but today, I'm so proud to watch these kids. And I came out at work in 2019 when I won Miss Trans USA, because the motto for Miss Trans USA was trans visibility. I'm like, okay, if you're gonna talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. And it was probably the hardest thing for me to do. And don't laugh at me when I tell you this, it was the hardest thing for me to do, because I, as a kid growing up, I didn't have any friends. Not because I was mean to anybody else, not because I was a horrible person, just because I was different. I was a feminine. I knew at 3 years old that I wanted to be a girl. I told my mom at 3 years old I wanted to be a girl, and my dad, and I had kids beating me up my whole life. And finally, as the person that I was able to become, that I always knew I was inside, I had friends, and they just think that, I'm crazy Candi, but so when I won Miss Trans USA, I thought, okay. And I posted a picture of me winning on my Facebook page, on my flight attendant Facebook page. And I just said, so this happened last night. I thought they could read the sash and I wouldn't have to out myself. And, but you couldn't read the sash, because everybody's like, congrats, what'd you win? Congrats, what'd you win? I went, crap, they can't read it.
Damn it.
And I said, well, the next day I go, and I don't normally have anxiety, but I had such anxiety coming back. And I said, Friday was National Coming Out Day, and Saturday night I won Miss Trans USA. I hope that you'll still love me for the human being that I am, with a heart and a soul. And it went viral, and everybody was like, didn't know, didn't care. We love you. You're even more beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And when I came to work, the in-flight department gave me a standing ovation. And that's when it started, and the airline embraced it, and had an interview with me on our airline website to over 130,000 employees around the world. And were proud to introduce me as their employee, Miss Trans USA. They had me go and talk at several conventions for them, as Miss Trans USA. So, I mean, things had changed. I wish I was that. And I will say that year, as Miss Trans USA, gave me a platform to talk better, where I could get in front of people, talking at hospitals. I spoke to a couple of hospitals. And so, I'm thankful for my Black sisters and brothers, and I apologize for not being a better person, or a better voice. I had to get that out there. So,
Yeah. Yep. I really appreciate that you brought that in, because I think, as a very, very white trans guy who has all of the privilege, probably the most privilege of anyone in our community. I mean, except for folks who make probably a lot more money than me. But I mean, I think about that. Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think about that a lot, and especially in the moments when I maybe feel the most afraid in this current moment. And I think about, well, am I going to take off my Trans Northland button? Am I going to, am I going to have these visible signs? Like, do I feel safe doing this? And every time I just I can't do it, I guess, just because I continue to think I am this person who has so much privilege, and I think power, and how will I, continue to do my best to try to use that, right, in these ways that can open doors for everyone else to walk through. And I just really want to, I think, applaud you, because I think, and I'm gonna pop this comment up on the screen from Meg. Thanks for sharing this. You know, it says the battles our kids are not having to fight right now are because of you.
Oh.
And I think it's because of you, Candi, and all of the people who have come before us and who are a part of our LGBTQ plus history and who are continuing to do it every day, like every single one of us watching, right? Who's a queer trans person. You know, we are the history. We're making it right now. And in a
You
time
with this
when
amazing podcast and all that you do up in Duluth and everything. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's these conversations and just, you know, looking to, again, all of our ancestors who have come before us, right, who have gotten us to this point where, you know, I remember I had to go to therapy for like at least 6 months before I could get a letter to go see a doctor about hormones, you know, and now I can just send a family who has a trans youth to like, here's 3 doctors you could choose from right here in this area. And that's huge. And those people are still here, you know, those providers, the allies, you know, our queer siblings in the community, like we are all still here and have the ability to continue creating this beautiful, safe community for ourselves. And I think, you know, learning more about the history is just like this starting point for us, because then we don't have to recreate the wheel, right? People have done this. And so how can we learn from those folks? How can we bring in and be welcoming to more and more folks in our community and really become this team that you mentioned right from the get-go in this conversation?
Absolutely. You know, we have to stay together. I'm so grateful for the group of family, chosen family that I have in Milwaukee. They support me. And, you know, even when I have my moments of, you know, feeling battered down by what this government and what these Christian national groups are doing, you know, which is nothing that Jesus Christ would do, not the teachings that I ever learned. And, you know, I mean, it's exactly the opposite, but you know, it's it's the community and our chosen family and friends that are going to get us through it. You know, I never let any of those kids or anybody growing up tell me that I couldn't be who I exactly wanted to be. And I looked at other people who became who they wanted to be. I mean, let's look at Christine Jorgensen. I mean, she wasn't the first, but she was the first well-known, you know, visible in America. And you know what? She didn't let any of the negativity stop her. I never let that. So don't ever, ever let anybody tell you who you are or who you can't be. Because you know what? You can be whoever you want to be. Maybe not a tree, but yeah, that's not a person. So
I don't know, maybe.
maybe, but you know, it just you have to surround yourself with people that do support you, even if you don't have, you know, given family. Find that chosen family that you can have that support and you know, and find them online. We're out there. You know, you can find me. You can find the LGBT, you know, the Wisconsin, you know, History Project online. We're out there. We're there for people, you know, as you are. So I hope that you know, sharing this on you know, my page, people will get to see this and see you and will join you and start following you for all the people that you're going to be interviewing and all the things that you do, you know, because it takes an army. So
that is it.
and we have to be that. I don't want to use army, you know, because somebody will turn it around. See, I told you that they're, you know, you know, they're radicalizing right now. You know, you know, and I don't want to call it a love fest. You know, I mean, I'm looking for the right, you know, the right support group word for us. You know, we just have to become, you know, just that I'm going to tell you one quick story real quick. When I was Miss Trans USA and I traveled around, I thought, what is my platform going to be? And, you know, I learned a lot of different history, other places as I traveled. But some of the times at some of the events that I went to, I heard from, and I remember this from the 80s. In the 80s, a lot of the times the gays and the lesbians just did not get along. You know, it was so, and then, oh my God, the trans. And so then on in 2019, traveling around, you know, I'd hear the gays say, well, you know, I just don't get the lesbians, but then I don't get the non-binaries, you know, and I don't get this. And then the lesbians, well, I don't get the gays and I don't get this. And then the non-binaries, I don't get why everybody doesn't get me. And, you know, so on and so forth. And I'm like, you know, the problem is, you know, and this is what became my speech. We are all under one beautiful rainbow umbrella, you know, and you've got to stop cutting one out or blaming it on one or the other just as a scapegoat to make yourself feel better. And I said, you need to take the time to actually get to know each other in that group. And sometimes this was at prides and outdoor prides. And I told these people, I said, you know what? I want you to stand up. I want you to turn around, not to somebody you know, somebody you don't know. And I want you to hug them. If you're not a hugger, shake their hand, introduce yourself. And I said, get to know each other, learn about each other, because knowledge is strength and strength is unity. And within unity, then we can fight these people. If we're divided, which they try to do with us, we are going to have no strength and they will win. And we can't let them win. We need to be unified as a whole group, you know, and as human beings. So don't turn into them trying to exclude, you know, a certain human being because you don't understand. You are in a group where people say they don't understand you. Time to buck up and learn about everybody.
Damn. Yeah, I don't even know if I can follow that, but dang, I mean, it's so true, Candi.
That was my platform that I got up and told people. And the best part of that was to see people turn around and hug each other, hug people that they didn't know. And I thought for a minute, I hope I made a difference, if at least just in one person's life, to really learn about each other, you know. So I hope I did.
I know that you did. I'll just throw that out there. And I, you know, maybe one final thought I'm having that sort of came from your words there is just, you know, everything around DEI. And I keep seeing people say, like, let's say those words, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. If we say that we are for that as a community, as an individual, then let's be about it in our own community, right? And I think it just goes to, you know, I think the larger theme of this whole conversation has just kept coming back to that, you know, just the fact that we have this really strong, you know, sometimes violent, a lot of times vibrant history in our community, and we're going to continue building that together, and we need all of us in this
especially
fight.
Because of somebody like you who has put on a platform, or the Wisconsin LGBTQ Project, who has created a platform. We have the internet to bond together now. So
that's right. I know. And I love it. Now it's like, now I have you, new friend, new connection. You know, I'm just feeling so grateful. I think for this conversation and for, you know, the fact that we got connected. I want to just say thank you, Candi,
Sean,
for taking the time to join us. And I think just really, I was a little nervous about this conversation for a couple of like little in the scene kind of things, and you know, getting to meet you for the first time, and you've just been lovely, of course. And so
thank you. Ditto. Yes, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yes, and I want you to stay safe out there and continue doing the incredible work that you and the whole organization are doing over at Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project.
They're amazing. They're
Heck
amazing.
yeah, they are. Yes. Well, as we are wrapping up here, we just want to say thank you again to all of you who tuned in, live. And man, the chat was just hopping. I'm taking a peek now. There's a lot of thank yous
Can I go
coming
back
in.
and look at the chat? I mean,
yes, you should be able to. Yep. And folks can watch this after the fact on our Facebook page, as well as we'll put it up on our YouTube. So I'll make sure you see it, Candi.
thank you.
But yeah, just wrapping things up. One of the last things I kind of like to shout out to folks is one of the things we really love that we've worked on is our community events calendar. And so, we're always about folks connecting into community, whether that's at a queer skate club or a drag show coming up. And so I just want to shout out a couple of events quick that are just they happen to be on our calendar. Just to give you an example, because there's so many cool things and people organizing stuff. So, for example, tomorrow, happening Thursday at 11 a.m., there's an intimate partner violence, authoritarianism, and trans lives virtual panel discussion. Like, go check that out. That's with our friends over at Forge. Actually, are they in Milwaukee? Do you know Forge?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I always forget. I think I get the M, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Madison, but they're somewhere in Wisconsin. Forge, they do really great work. Let's see. Tomorrow, of course, we've got the Queer Art Club happening with Outfront Minnesota. You can find all these details on our website at transnorthland.org/connection. So you can plan your weekends now, folks. Lots happening. And then, just one final thank you to you, Candi, and all of our viewers. Sending lots of love to all of you wherever you are. And just don't forget, we're not alone out here.
No, we're not. We got each other.
That's right. We got to stick together.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, y'all. Everybody take good care, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks. And I'm very excited to announce our upcoming guest, but not right now. We got to tease you a little bit, so stay tuned for that update later, everybody.
Do I get the tease after we sign off so I can find out? Okay.
I'll tell you, yeah.
Okay.
All right, y'all. Well, take good care, and we'll see you next time.